On the night of my son's wedding, when everyone expected laughter and champagne to flow, my husband stood up and announced he was leaving me for my best friend. 200 guests froze in shock, waiting for me to break down. But I didn't. I smiled because what he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. Before we dive in, make sure to like and subscribe to Not So Perfect Family 365, where real family secrets come to light. The chandelier above the ballroom looked like a frozen cascade of stars, glittering, extravagant, merciless. It threw light over crystal flutes, the white roses I'd chosen because my son said they felt classic, and the 200 people who had gathered to bless a marriage, and as it turned out, witness a burial. "Excuse me," Michael said, tapping his glass with a butter knife. He didn't need to raise his voice. The band hushed mid-Sinatra, waiters stalled with trays of sea bass, and my son Daniel, still flushed from the first dance with his new wife, turned toward his father like a kid again. I already knew the speech Michael had planned, the one about love and endurance, and 30 years with your mother taught me that marriage is choosing each other every day. He'd rehearsed it in the mirror, his eyes soft, his jaw square, but he didn't give that speech. "I can't live a lie," he said instead. His hand found the hand of the woman beside him, Lauren, my best friend since I was 22, the person who held my bouquet at our wedding and swore she'd stand with me through everything. She was in a slate blue dress I'd helped her pick out last month. Funny, the useless things your brain remembers while your life is being rearranged without your consent. A collective intake of breath. Someone's fork hit a plate like a bell striking. From the head table, Daniel frowned. My daughter Sophie stood so abruptly her chair screeched. I put a hand on her wrist without looking at her. Michael looked at me across the room. "Evelyn," he said as if my name were an apology. "I'm leaving. There are 100 ways to fall apart. I've rehearsed most of them over the years. What if, what if, what if? In every version I sob or throw a glass or beg. In none of them do I smile. But that's what I did. A small, contained curve of the mouth that felt like a switch being flipped. Light on, light off." The bride's aunt gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I heard them all and none of them. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was steady enough to terrify him. "You finally said out loud what you've been saying in your head for months." Lauren flinched. It was quick, a snag of the eye you could miss if you weren't trained to watch numbers change by tenths of a cent and know what it means. "I am. 30 years of running books leaves you fluent in tremor and tone." Daniel looked like he might be sick. "Dad, what are you doing?" he asked, voice strangled. "Not here. Not tonight." Michael cleared his throat as if that could make what he'd done tidy. I need to be honest, son," he said, squeezing Lauren's fingers as though she were a talisman. "Your mother and I—" "Don't you dare," Sophie snapped, stepping between the tables, her gold dress catching the light like a flare. "Don't you dare turn this into a teachable moment." "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my hand on her wrist. "Not tonight." I kept my eyes on Michael. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the room, and heard how polite I sounded, as if I were stepping away to take a call instead of stepping out of a life. I lifted my clutch from the table, slid a cream envelope beside Michael's champagne flute, and turned to the mic Daniel had used a few minutes earlier. "This is still Daniel and Lily's night," I said, and I swear I could feel the room exhale, relief and shame mixing like perfume. "Eat, dance, toast them. If you must gossip, at least do it with a decent Pinot in hand." There were laughs, nervous, grateful. The bridal party looked at me the way parishioners look at a priest who has just improvised a prayer after the roof caved in. "Evelyn," Lauren said, moving toward me. "Please, can we talk privately?" Her voice had the low, soothing cadence she used when I was panicking over college deadlines or Sophie's fever at 2 a.m. when we were 20-something and broke and believed loyalty was a lifetime contract. I took in the diamond necklace at her collarbone, new, and the small tremor at the base of her throat, also new. "We will," I said. "Later, when I'm not wearing mascara I like." Michael tried for warm authority. "You can be angry," he said, head tilted, jaw set, "but you don't have to be cruel." I laughed. It surprised both of us. "Cruel?" I said softly. "You did this at your son's wedding, Michael. You picked an audience." "Mom," Daniel said, eyes desperate. "Do you want me to?" "No," I said, smoothing his lapel as if he were 11 and about to give a book report. He smelled like cedar and champagne and nerves. "You are going to dance with your wife and eat cake and pretend the people we invited love us as much as they said they did last week." I pressed a kiss to his cheek. "This is a storm passing over the house. Don't open the windows for it." Sophie gripped my hand. "I'm coming with you." "You're staying," I said, because this was the last thing I could give them tonight, normalcy shaped by force. I squeezed her fingers. "Trust me, honey, I'm all right." I turned and walked the length of the ballroom. The band started again. God bless them. something bright and old-fashioned, as if we could rewind to 30 minutes ago, when Lauren and I were fixing Lily's veil and Michael was telling the florist he knew all about peonies now because he'd listened to a podcast on flower language. The wedding planner caught my eye. "Mrs. Hart," she whispered, as if asking permission to keep time moving. "Keep the timeline," I said. "We've paid for the room till midnight." In the corridor, the world narrowed. Paisley carpet, distant laughter, the bass line bleeding through the wall. I remembered the first year of our marriage, when Michael and I ate boxed macaroni on the floor of our rented duplex and swore we'd never be the kind of people who looked good in rooms that didn't belong to us. I remembered Lauren and me at 25, too much hairspray, not enough sense, swearing we'd never become our mothers. I remembered last winter, the bank alert that pinged at 2:14 a.m., and the way the numbers told a story Michael hadn't yet found the words for. I remembered not sleeping after that. Outside, the night air was crisp enough to bite. I stood under the portico and let the chill do what tears would not. My phone buzzed. A text from an unsaved number that I knew anyway, filed, stamped, and scheduled. "See email for copies." I exhaled. The envelope on Michael's table held the first page of something he hadn't read closely in a long time. The rest sat in a judge's inbox and a clerk's tray, and in a folder on my desktop labeled, with uncharacteristic melodrama, "Insurance Against Idiocy." The door swung open behind me. "Evelyn," Michael's voice, tight, brittle. "What the hell is this?" He was holding the envelope as if it were a rat. "You can't, how dare you, on tonight of all nights?" How dare I? And let the words find their own temperature. "You chose the stage, Michael, I just chose the lighting." Lauren hovered a step behind him, eyes glossy, mouth pinched. "Ev," she said, the nickname from 1,000 inside jokes made into a weapon by use. "Please don't do anything rash." "You're standing in my rash," I said mildly and watched the line land. Michael shook the envelope, papers trembling. "You froze the joint accounts," he hissed, voice gone small. "You filed an emergency order. This is insane." "What's insane?" I said. "Is thinking you can empty an account in increments of $4,900 and no one will notice. What's insane is announcing your exit with a woman who used to spend Thanksgiving on my couch." I tilted my head. "What's insane is forgetting I'm the one who balanced the books while you made promises you couldn't fund." He glanced at Lauren, then back at me, defiant as a cornered teenager. "We love each other. Then you'll be fine," I said. "Love thrives on budgeting." "Ev," Lauren said again, less sure now. "We were going to tell you." "You just did," I said, and for a second the three of us could hear the band inside kicking into "At Last," because irony never misses a cue. Michael stepped closer, dropping his voice. "We can do this quietly," he said. "No need to this." He waved the envelope like a white flag. "No need to humiliate each other. We've got debt, there are complications. If you make this ugly, everyone loses." There it was, slid in casually, "We've got debt." As if it were a mutual hobby. As if the debt that had appeared like mildew in our ledger had not coincided precisely with the months Lauren's rent miraculously vanished and Michael's investment dinners, stacked receipts in my kitchen drawer. "I don't humiliate people, Michael," I said. "They humiliate themselves in public places while wearing rented tuxedos." The planner cracked the door then, cheeks pink, apologetic. "They're ready for the family photos," she said to me, and then to Michael, because good staff never drop a beat. "Mr. Hart, the photographer needs you on the terrace." "Go," I told him. "Smile. Pretend you haven't set your son's life on fire with a sparkler you couldn't resist lighting." I stepped down from the portico toward the drive, heels crisp on stone. "Evelyn," he called. "We're not done." I paused at the edge of the light, the night beyond me deep and clean. "No," I said and met his eyes and let him see it, the steel he'd taught me to hide because it made him look soft. "We're just getting started." My phone buzzed again. "Funds secured. Locks scheduled. Monday 8 a.m. Service confirmed." I slipped the screen dark and slid the phone back into my clutch. Inside, the band swelled, the crowd cheered. A bride laughed the laugh I'd hoped my daughter-in-law would get to keep forever. I walked to the curb where the car waited, and when the driver opened the door, I caught my reflection in the dark window, composed, older than this morning, somehow lighter. I didn't look back at the ballroom. I didn't need to. Let them dance. Let them whisper. Let Michael open that envelope when the cake is cut and the sparklers are lit and the band hits its final chord. He wanted an audience. He'll have one. The morning after the wedding should have been about photographs in silver frames, leftover cake eaten straight from the box, and the gentle fatigue that follows joy. Instead, it was about silence, the kind that pressed against the windows and seeped into the walls. I sat at the kitchen island, coffee cooling untouched, staring at the empty chair across from me. For 28 years, that chair had been filled by Michael, first with hair damp from early showers, later with newspapers and grumbles about traffic, and recently with his phone glowing at dawn, his thumb flying across the screen while he pretended to check stocks. Lauren's face kept intruding on my memory. How many times had she sat at this very island, drinking wine with me after school pickups, laughing about husbands who couldn't load dishwashers? Now her smile lived in my mind as something sharper, something weaponized. I closed my eyes, but what came wasn't last night. It was 6 months ago when the first crack appeared. It was 2:14 a.m. when the bank notification chimed on my phone. A transfer of $4,900 had been made from our joint account. Odd number, odd hour, odd enough to sit me bolt upright in bed. Michael snored beside me, the easy, oblivious sleep of a man convinced he'd never be caught. The next morning I asked him casually about it. "Just some business," he said, sipping his coffee. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Short-term loan to a friend. Don't worry about it." I knew better. Numbers were my language. For 20 years, I'd worked as a financial controller at Truvanta, and I could spot a disguised expense the way a hunter spots tracks in fresh snow. Over the following weeks, more transfers appeared. $4, $850, $4, $920, $4, $875. Always just under $5,000, always at odd hours. By February, I had opened a separate spreadsheet, logging each withdrawal with the precision of a surgeon marking incisions. The worst part wasn't the money, it was the lies. Michael became slippery, his explanations rehearsed but never solid. He claimed new investments, a silent partnership in a startup, favors for colleagues. Once he even muttered about paying off old family debts I'd somehow never heard of. And then there were the dinners. He was home later, carrying the scent of red wine I hadn't poured, steak I hadn't cooked, perfume I didn't wear. I found receipts shoved into his jacket pockets, Del Frisco's, Ruth's Chris, the kind of restaurants we used to save for anniversaries. Each receipt for two, each totaling more than the tight budget he scolded me about. I wanted to believe he was simply restless, chasing business ventures again. God knows he'd done it before. The handcrafted furniture phase that lasted 6 months, the juice bar partnership that tanked in 9. I'd carried us through each collapse with extra hours and careful savings, but something about this was different. It wasn't until March that the truth started to take shape. Michael left his phone unlocked one morning, drowsy from too much whiskey the night before. I didn't intend to snoop, I only meant to silence the buzzing. But there they were, messages with Lauren. "You look stunning last night. Wish I could have stayed longer. Soon we'll be free. After the wedding, it all begins." I sat frozen while climbing my throat, my best friend. The woman who held Sophie when she was teething, who helped plan Daniel's prom. Lauren. I didn't confront him immediately. I wanted to. God, I wanted to scream until the walls cracked, but instinct told me to wait. Patience had always been my hidden weapon. Instead, I called an attorney. Philip Anderson, recommended by a colleague who had whispered, "He's ruthless but discreet." Sitting across from him in his oak-paneled office, I felt both terrified and vindicated as I slid the receipts, bank records, and copies of text messages across the desk. Philip raised an eyebrow. "Do you realize what you have here?" "Evidence of betrayal," I said flatly. "Evidence," he corrected, "that activates your prenuptial agreement. Section 12, the fidelity clause." I blinked. I hadn't thought about that dusty document in decades. Michael had insisted on it back then when he was the one with ambition and I was the one with family money. Irony is a cruel but faithful companion. Philip leaned forward. "If you can prove the affair, and you already can, the house, the retirement accounts, even the Savannah property, all yours." Back at home, I looked at Michael across the dinner table. He smiled at me, oblivious, sauce on his chin. "We should cut back," he said. "Save more for retirement." I forced a nod, my spoon scraping china. Inside, a storm was building. I remembered our early years, when we lived paycheck to paycheck and laughed about eating pasta 3 nights a week. When he bought me a cheap ring but promised me a lifetime of loyalty. When Lauren and I toasted to futures none of us could yet imagine. That memory hurt worse than his betrayal, because I realized something that night. I had always been the one holding us together, while he was the one loosening every knot. And so I waited. I documented. I smiled at Lauren when she joined our family dinners, though every glance between her and Michael was a dagger. I hugged her at Sophie's birthday, smelled her perfume, recognized it from the receipts. I was calm, methodical, patient. Because if Michael thought he was building a secret future, I was building one too, just not the one he expected. And when the wedding day came, when he chose to play his theater of betrayal in front of 200 witnesses, he didn't realize I had already written the final act. That envelope on the table wasn't a reaction. It was Act 2 of a story I had been scripting for months. The kettle whistled on the stove, breaking me out of memory. I poured the water, steady hands despite the chaos thrumming inside me. The house felt different now, quieter, emptier, like it was holding its breath. Upstairs in the back of the closet, I knew Michael had already packed his bags. I'd seen them weeks ago, suitcases tucked behind winter coats, ready for his grand escape. I smiled then, cold, certain. He thought he was ahead. He had no idea how far behind he really was. I had addressed it on thick cream stock because theater matters. If Michael was going to turn my son's wedding into a stage, I would at least control the props. Inside sat 4 things: a certified copy of the emergency order freezing our joint accounts, the petition for dissolution, already stamped with a docket number, a highlighted copy of our prenuptial agreement, Section 12 circled in red like a teacher's correction, and a 1-page summary I wrote in plain English for man who never read footnotes. At the bottom of that page was a short line Philip had suggested: further disclosures forthcoming per O. CGA Section 19-6-15 and Rule 24. 2. Michael hated 2 things: surprises and statutes. I hadn't included the flash drive. That was for later. You don't burn all your fuel at takeoff. Clean, precise, unemotional, Philip had said when I slid the draft across his desk a week earlier. He'll call you cold. Let him. Cold wins hearings. In the quiet after the wedding, I laid everything out again on the kitchen island and read my own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. My summary was not cruel. It was efficient: date of first suspicious transfer, running total, names of accounts, merchant codes. This is how you write when you've built your adult life around making columns reconcile. My phone lit with a text from Daniel. Mom, Lily's crying. Sophie's with us, are you safe? I'm home, I'm safe, love your wife, eat cake. I've got the rest, I replied. It felt obscene to type cake, as if normalcy were a word you could will into behaving. Another buzz. Unknown number, though the message gave it away. This is Philip. Judge signed the temporary order at 9:47 p.m. Marshall will serve on Monday morning if he ducks private service. I breathed out. The line of dominoes I'd arranged for months had tipped exactly when I nudged it. I made tea because that is what women are taught to do with their hands when their hearts don't know where to go. Steam rose, memory followed. We signed the prenup in a cheap conference room, back when Michael was still a salesman with a full tank of charm, and I was the one with the trust my grandmother left for rainy seasons. He'd insisted then, to protect us both, he said, a phrase that felt like safety at 23 and foreshadowing at 52. I remember the way he held my eyes, promising loyalty as if vows were an investment he'd diversified. I remember Lauren waiting in the car with a bag of takeout, honking twice and shouting, "Hurry up, lovers." Out the window, she'd never read Section 12 either. The door opened and shut behind me hard enough to rattle the glass in the cabinet. Michael crossed the kitchen in 4 long strides, the envelope clutched in his fist like a strangled bird. "What is this?" he demanded, shaking it so the tabs hissed against each other. "You filed, you froze the accounts. You can't just—" "I can," I said, not looking up from my tea. "I did." He slapped the prenup onto the marble, jabbing at the red circle. "This expired," he said. "We talked about this." "No, you talked," I said. "I listened. Section 12 doesn't expire. Fidelity survives the mortgage and the midlife crisis." I tapped the notary seal with 1 fingernail. "So does your signature." He laughed, incredulous. "You're going to take me for everything because of a piece of paper from before we owned anything." I set the cup down. "I'm going to enforce the contract you insisted on because you broke the only part that mattered." He swallowed. For a moment, he looked younger, scared almost. Then his jaw found the old angle of defiance. "We have debts," he said. "You think you're hurting me, you'll collapse the house on yourself. The Savannah condo has a hold on the title," I said, watching the word land. The bank called me when the HELOC application came in with my digital signature. Odd how my hand managed to sign at 2:31 a.m. while my phone sat on my nightstand. He blinked the way you blink when your pupils meet sunlight. What did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. "Fraud alert, flagged, they were grateful, compliance loves a head start." He ran a hand over his face. "This is vindictive, Ev, it's defensive." I said, "Learning the difference is what adulthood should have taught you." He looked around our kitchen with the expression of a man visiting the set of a show he used to star in. His gaze snagged on the photo of Daniel's Little League team, on Sophie in braces at the piano, on the dent in the fridge door where a Thanksgiving casserole once went rogue. He tried a different tack. We can work this out privately," he said, voice dropping to confessional. "You and me, no judges, no spectacle, you get the house. We split the investments, I keep the business. We can tell the kids." "The kids watched you detonate their brother's wedding," I said. "The spectacle is your signature style." He bristled. "Lauren and I—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "If you say her name in this house tonight, you'd better be quoting an apology." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You'll never forgive me," he said, wonder and accusation braided together. I did, I said. For years, you just kept cashing it. He flinched like the words were a thrown glass. His phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't check it. I could see the name flash anyway, reflected in the shine of the marble. Lauren. He laid his palm over the screen like a man smothering a fire. Tell me what you want, Evelyn, he said finally. What's your end game? I want my life back, I said, and a clean balance sheet. I slid the last page from the envelope, the one with the neat bullet points. Here's the shortlist. You vacate by Friday. You produce full disclosures, pay stubs, tax returns, ledgers for the LLCs you pretend aren't shells. You stop moving money in and out of personal accounts like it's choreography. You stop lying to our children. You show up in court clean. He stared at the page as if it were written in a language he didn't speak. You recorded me, he said suddenly, eyes flicking to the small black device on the shelf near the pantry. That's what this is, isn't it? You and your rules and your... I recorded our conversations about household money, I said. Georgia is one-party consent. You knew that when you ran sales down here, remember? I lifted a brow. Or did you forget the statutes you used to cite when it benefited you? He barked a laugh without humor. God, you're good. Yes, I said. I am. He blew out a breath, the fight leaving him in increments. I'll call my lawyer, he said. I hope you get one who reads, I said, and felt the petty satisfaction of it even as a part of me ached for the boy who fed me mac and cheese on a bare mattress and promised me a porch swing when we were old. So that's it, he asked softer. 30 years and you hand me a homework packet. It's a syllabus, I said. You'll be graded on completion. He picked up the envelope, jaw tight. You always did like to be the smartest person in the room, he said. No, I said. I liked rooms where no one was trying to make a fool out of me. He left without slamming the door, which felt like progress until I realized it was only fatigue. When the house swallowed the silence again, I opened the drawer by the stove and took out the second envelope, the one with Lauren's name in the same careful script. It held copies of the receipts with her signature on the business dinners, the email where she forwarded Michael an apartment listing with us underlined, and an affidavit template Philip said would make a judge's eyebrows lift if she signed it. I, Lauren Pierce, declare under penalty of perjury. It wasn't a threat. It was a choice, tell the truth or share the consequences. My phone buzzed. Sophie, he texted. He said you're making a mistake. Want me to block him? Not yet, I wrote. Let him talk. People tell you who they are when they think they're persuading you. A second message came before I could put the phone down. Unknown number, no punctuation. Breathless cadence I knew from 100 midnight calls about nothing and everything. Ev, it's me, we need to talk, please alone, it's important. I didn't know he. I stared at the name until it stopped being letters and became a person on my porch at 11:23 p.m., shivering in a sweater I recognized, eyes rimmed red, knuckles white around her phone. Lauren. Behind her in the streetlight, a tow truck idled, chains bright as jewelry. Don't send me away, she said, voice breaking. I did something stupid, and I think he did something worse. The knock on my bedroom door came just after dawn, soft at first, then insistent. I already knew who it was. Mom, Sophie's voice. Can I come in? I pulled the robe tighter and opened the door. She stood there with eyes swollen from crying, mascara still smudged from last night's disaster of a wedding. My daughter, 24 years old, smart as a whip, and still in that moment, little girl looking for answers. She stepped inside before I could invite her, pacing across the rug like a caged animal. Do you realize what he did to me, to Daniel, to you? I sat on the edge of the bed. I realize. No, Mom, her voice cracked. You don't. He humiliated you, in front of everyone, on my brother's wedding day. She whirled on me, her anger a storm barely contained. And you just walked away. You didn't scream, you didn't throw anything. You didn't even fight back. I studied her, my practical, fiery Sophie. She had inherited Michael's sharp tongue but my patience, and right now she was running out of both. I fought, I said quietly. Just not the way you expected. She frowned. What does that mean? It means your father thinks he scripted the play. He forgot I wrote the ending months ago. Sophie blinked. Wait, you knew about him and Lauren. Her voice twisted on the name. I nodded. For a long time. Her jaw dropped. And you didn't tell me or Daniel. We've been sitting at the dinner table with her, hugging her at birthdays, trusting her. That's exactly why I didn't, I cut in. It wasn't your burden. You deserved your graduation, your career, your freedom from this mess. Daniel deserved his wedding day. She let out a harsh laugh. Yeah, Dad really made sure of that. For a moment, silence stretched between us. The morning light slipped across her face, highlighting the fury etched into her features. She looked so much like me at her age that it hurt. You think I didn't notice? She said suddenly. The late nights, the texts he kept hiding, the way he snapped at you over nothing. I knew something was wrong. I even followed him once. My heart stuttered. You did what? Her chin lifted, defiant. Last winter, he said he had a meeting downtown. I drove after him. He wasn't at the Marriott like he claimed, he was at her apartment. The words hit like glass shattering. You saw them together, she nodded, lips trembling. I saw him kiss her in the parking lot. I sat there in my car for 20 minutes. Mom, shaking so bad I could barely drive home. I wanted to tell you. God, I almost did. But when I came back, you were sitting at the kitchen table with your spreadsheets, looking so tired, and I thought, maybe you already knew. Maybe you didn't need me to break your heart on top of it. I closed my eyes. My daughter had carried the weight of her father's betrayal in silence, just as I had. We had both been protecting each other while Michael dismantled our family brick by brick. She dropped onto the chair opposite me, tears spilling again. I hate him. No, I said gently, you're angry, that's different. I don't care what you call it, she snapped. He's ruined everything, and Lauren, she used to braid my hair before piano recitals. She bought me my first real heels. She lied to us for years. How could you just sit there last night and smile like nothing happened? Because smiling was the only weapon I needed, I answered. Your father wanted me broken. He expected me to crumble in front of 200 witnesses. Instead, I walked out with my head high. That was my victory. Her eyes narrowed. Victory, what about justice? I reached for her hand, squeezed it until she met my gaze. Justice is already in motion. Her brow furrowed, confusion cutting through her rage. What did you do? Let's just say the envelope your father opened last night was only the beginning. She stared at me, wide-eyed, searching for the woman she thought she knew. Mom, who are you right now? I almost smiled. The same woman I've always been, you're just finally seeing her. Sophie shook her head, half in awe, half in fear. Dad has no idea what's coming, does he? I didn't answer, I didn't need to, because at that moment downstairs the front door slammed open and Michael's voice thundered through the house. Evelyn, we need to talk now. Sophie stiffened, eyes flashing with fury. She stood before I could stop her, her jaw set like stone. I'll talk to him, she said coldly. It's my turn. And before I could pull her back, she was already storming down the stairs, ready to face the man who had broken her world. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, Sophie was already squared off with her father in the foyer, chin up, eyes blazing, a heart through and through. You don't get to bark orders, she said. Not in this house. Not after last night. Michael's gaze slid from her to me, searching for the version of me that would smooth the air. She's retired, I thought. She put in 30 years, let the air stay rough. We'll talk as a family, he said, working it reasonable. No lawyers, no theatrics. You set a microphone on my son's wedding, I said. We're done pretending you hate theatrics. The doorbell cut him off. A staccato ring, then another. Sophie crossed her arms. If that's Lauren, I'll... It's not Lauren, I said because I'd seen the outline through the glass. Small, neat. A cardigan that tried too hard to be neutral. My sister, Clara, came in with a bakery box and a look that wanted an absolution. I brought croissants, she announced, as if pastry could spackle a cracked foundation. I thought you know carbs, Sophie snorted. Michael exhaled relief, an ally he recognized. Clara, he said, warmth flooding his voice. Thank God, maybe you can help your sister calm down. Clara's eyes darted to me. Bakery box talked against her ribs. Ev, she said softly. I heard, I don't have words. Try honesty, Sophie said. Clara's smile pinched. I deserve that, but maybe we could all sit down. No shouting. We're not shouting, I said. We're sorting. Michael took the box, set it on the console like an offering. Your sister understands compromise, he told Sophie, then turned to Clara. Tell her we can do this without scorched earth. Clara rubbed her palms together, the way she did before asking for money at 22 and again at 31. Ev, I know you don't want a war. I want math that adds up, I said, and I want the lying to stop. Her gaze flicked to Michael, then back to me. Something in her face faltered. A tremor, a tell. Last night flashed back, the smell of hot metal beneath the portico lights, the tow truck idling like a patient animal at the curb while Lauren stood on my porch with her hair yanked into a knot and her voice low with fear. Don't send me away, she'd said. I did something stupid, and I think he did something worse. What stupid? I'd asked, arms folded to keep my hands from shaking. She looked past me into the dark house like she was asking permission to be forgiven. He said it didn't matter, she whispered. That it was just a stamp, that everyone does it. Clara told him it was fine, she has the commission, it's a technicality, she said. Lauren dug for her phone and thrust it out. On the screen, a photo of a document, my name in block letters, a notary seal I recognized from every birthday affidavit we'd ever done for school. Clara M. Benton, Notary Public, State of Georgia. The timestamp in the corner read 10:41 p.m. On a Sunday, I knew Clara had been home with a cold. He said he needed it to speed up the line of credit, Lauren rattled on. Just a bridging thing so he could put down funds on a place before the wedding. He said you'd be taken care of, that this is how people with assets do it. And when I said it felt wrong, Clara said I was being dramatic. Lauren lifted wet eyes. Ev, I know dramatic, that was criminal. The tow truck had revved then and she flinched. They're taking my car, she admitted, voice small. He missed 2 payments. He said he'd covered it from the business account. He didn't. You co-signed, I asked, a stupid question. The only kind left, she nodded, shame and mascara in equal measure. I thought he was leaving with it. Doesn't matter what I thought, I can't undo it, but I can tell you what they did. She scrolled through messages. A thread with Michael, stamps handled. Clara is a lifesaver. A reply from a contact labeled C, it's fine. Don't text about it, my commission covers, we're family, she'll never know. I had felt something cold, clean, and permanent settle then, not rage, a decision. Now in the foyer, Clara stood 6 feet from my rug with flour dust on her sleeve and the pieces clicked where they always had to land. Clara, I said, keeping my voice even, tell me about your notary seal. She went very still. Michael shot her a warning look she pretended not to see. It's my job, she said. I notarized documents, it's ordinary. Nothing about last month was ordinary, I said. You notarized my name when I wasn't present. You stamped a HELOC application with a signature you knew wasn't mine. You vouched for identity you didn't verify. Her mouth opened, closed. Ev, you committed fraud, Sophie said, stepping forward. On our house. Clara swallowed, color rising to her cheeks. I didn't, Michael said. He said you were on board, that you two talked, that it was a timing thing, and she stopped, read my face, and abandoned the script. I needed the money, she whispered, every bit of polish falling off at once. The salon's been bleeding since COVID. The landlord doubled the rent. I'm 3 months behind on taxes. He said if I helped, he'd float me until I was back. He promised. Sophie stared. So you sold my mother's signature for a couple months' rent? Clara flinched. Don't say it like that. How should we say it? I asked. Tears slipped finally. She didn't swipe them. I made a bad decision, she said, tiny and honest. I thought he's family. He wouldn't hurt you. I thought I was borrowing time. You were borrowing my house, I said. Michael found his temper then, familiar tired heat. For God's sake, it was an advance, he snapped. People do it every day. You think banks care if the stamp happens at the kitchen table or an office? It's paperwork. It's a felony, Sophie said. And you dragged my aunt into it. Clara looked at me like I held a trapdoor lever. Ev, I'm begging you, don't let him ruin me to save himself. The sentence fell between us like a confession and a verdict. Michael blanched. What is that supposed to mean? I reached for the folder on the hall table, slid out the printouts Lauren had texted me after the tow truck hauled away the last of her illusions. I set them on the console, one by one, like cards in a trick. The stamped page, the text thread, a bank email with a flagged login at 2:31 a.m., a photo of Clara's seal clear as a brand. Here's what happens next, I said. Clara, you draft a sworn affidavit today. You were not in my presence. You relied on Michael's representation. You received compensation. You regret and rescind. You give Philip every email, every text. In exchange, I tell the DA you cooperated. You testify, and we aim the charge where it belongs. Michael laughed, a short, incredulous bark. You wouldn't. I held his eyes. Watch me. Clara's shoulders sagged, relief and horror braided. I'll do it, she said, voice shaking. I'll do anything, just Ev, I'm so sorry. Sophie's jaw worked. She looked like she wanted to hug her aunt and shake her until something better fell out. You're going to fix it, she said, and it wasn't a question. Michael grabbed the bakery box as if it were a life raft. You're all insane, he said. You think a judge is going to? My phone rang. Philip, I put it on speaker. Evelyn, he said without preamble. Heads up, opposing counsel just filed an emergency motion to dissolve the freeze. They're claiming you committed fraud on the HELOC and therefore can't come into equity with clean hands. Sophie made a sound like a spark catching. Michael smirked, triumphant too fast. Philip continued, voice cool. Also, the bank forwarded us a notarization image attached to the application. It's helpful. The notary is one Clara M. Benton. Does that name mean anything to you? 3 pairs of eyes landed on me. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. In our foyer, the silence stretched taut as wire. It means, I said, never looking away from Michael, we'll be filing a response in an hour. And Evelyn, Philip added, dry as a paper cut, tell your sister to stop answering calls from numbers she doesn't recognize. The DA's office likes to make introductions early. The line clicked dead. Clara swayed. Michael set the croissants down with shaking hands. The doorbell rang again. Not tentative this time. Firm. Official. Through the beveled glass, I saw a county deputy on the porch holding a manila envelope and a clipboard. The deputy's knock echoed through the foyer like a gavel strike. Sophie stiffened beside me, arms crossed, while Clara looked as though the floor had just dropped out from under her. Michael, of course, straightened his jacket and tried to wear the mask of a man in control. He'd always been good at pretending, even when the walls around him were burning. "Mrs. Hart," the deputy's voice was firm, neutral, service of process. I opened the door. He handed me the manila envelope, asked me to sign his clipboard. The moment my pen left the paper, he tipped his hat and left without ceremony, his boots heavy on the steps. Michael pounced like a wolf. "Give it to me," he demanded, hand outstretched. I tucked the envelope against my chest. "It's addressed to me, Michael, not you. It concerns me," he snapped. "Exactly," I said. "That's why you'll see it in court." For a beat, the house was still except for Sophie's furious breathing. Then Michael lunged forward, trying to snatch the envelope. Sophie stepped between us like a guard dog. "Touch her," she hissed, "and I swear you'll regret it." Michael froze, stunned by his daughter's defiance. I used the moment to slip the papers from the envelope. Emergency motion, exactly what Philip had warned about. Michael sighed, claiming fraud, citing the HELOC application, pushing to dissolve the asset freeze. I almost laughed. They were building a case on the very document that tied him to Clara's forgery. "Interesting," I murmured, flipping the pages. Michael sneered. "You think this is a game? You froze my accounts, Ev. You humiliated me in front of my children. Do you have any idea what kind of hole you've dug yourself into?" "Funny," I said, calm as ice. "I was about to ask you the same." Clara sagged against the wall, her face chalk white. "Ev, I'll give the affidavit. I'll tell the truth, I can't." Michael whirled on her. Don't you dare throw me under the bus. You think you'll survive this? You'll lose your commission, you'll be charged." "You dragged me into it," she cried. "You said it was just paperwork, Michael, that nobody would know." "Shut up," he barked. Sophie snapped. "No, you shut up. For once in your life, admit what you've done instead of blaming everyone else." Her voice cracked the room open. For a moment, Michael's mask slipped, rage boiling underneath. But then he caught himself, smoothing his tie like that could erase the moment. "Fine," he said. "You want war, Evelyn, you'll get it. I'll fight you with every cent I have." "That won't take long," I said softly. His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I set the papers down on the console, folded my arms. "It means while you were funneling money into that secret account, forgot who built our financial foundation. You think I didn't notice? I've traced every cent, Michael, every transfer, every dinner with Lauren disguised as a business meeting, and I documented all of it." His smirk faltered. "You love gambling with numbers," I went on. "But I wrote the rules of this game and I've already locked the board." He shook his head, laughing, but it was hollow. "You don't scare me." "Good," I said. "Because fear isn't the point. Consequence is." For the first time since last night, I saw it flicker, the crack in his confidence. He knew. Clara broke the silence, voice trembling. "Ev, what do you want me to do?" "Draft the affidavit today," I said without hesitation. "We'll deliver it to Philip." That motion they filed just became evidence of their own fraud. The judge will eat it alive. Michael slammed his palm against the console, rattling the bakery box of untouched croissants. "You think you've won already?" "No," I said, meeting his glare. "I think the opening volley just landed, and you fired it at yourself." Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "Daniel's calling," she whispered, then answered. "Yeah, he's here. No, Mom's fine. Daniel, don't come. It's not your fight today." She hung up, looking at me, then at her father. "You're pathetic," she said flatly. "You wanted us to admire you instead. You've made sure we'll never look at you the same again." Michael's face flushed, but he said nothing. Not to her, not to me. He grabbed his coat from the rack, muttering, "This isn't over." The door slammed so hard the glass rattled. For a long moment it was just me, Sophie, and Clara in the silence he left behind. Clara whispered, "Ev, I'm sorry. Truly, I'll fix what I can." "You'd better," Sophie said coldly. I picked up the manila envelope again, weighing it in my hand. Michael thought he'd delivered a blow. He hadn't realized he'd just handed me the very weapon I needed, because financial warfare wasn't about who shouted loudest. It was about who understood the fine print, and that was always me. By Monday at 8:12 a.m., our town had already seen the video. Someone had filmed Michael's honesty speech on their phone, 32 seconds of a tuxedoed man announcing he was leaving his wife at his son's wedding while holding hands with the maid of honor of that wife's life. Posted to a neighborhood Facebook group, then to Instagram, then to a local gossip account with 40,000 followers. The caption did the rest, #wedding speech from hell. My phone pulsed in waves. "Are you okay?" from people who hadn't texted me in 5 years. Can you believe he did that? From people who absolutely could. A handful of women I trusted said only "I'm here." The rest wanted the story without paying the price of knowing me yesterday. At 9:03, the chamber emailed, "In light of recent developments, the board has voted to postpone Mr. Hart's luncheon address and to suspend his committee role pending review." They CC'd him, carefully polite. At 9:17, a client who had, 2 weeks ago, asked him to keynote their quarterly retreat wrote, "Given the distraction, we'll be going in another direction." By 10:00, Michael's LinkedIn apology was live. 800-word notes app confession that used the word journey twice and amicable 3 times. Comments divided neatly into 3 piles. Men congratulating him on his truth, women calling him a coward, and sales guys asking for coffee whenever you're back at it, brother. Sophie sat at my island scrolling, fuming. He's replying to people like he just survived cancer, she said. He wrote love is complicated with a heart emoji. Don't read the comments, I said, knowing she would and I wouldn't. At 10:32, Philip called, quick update. Opposing's emergency motion to dissolve the freeze. Judge Owens denied an ex-parte lift. She set a preliminary hearing for Thursday. The accounts stay locked till then. Also, Bank Counsel sent us a courtesy copy of a fraud investigation notice on that HELOC. They've opened an internal review. Good, I said, and meant it as a prayer and a promise. By noon, Michael's day had gone from spin to spiral. The country club canceled his tea time for maintenance. The local paper ran an item under Business Beat that said his boutique firm was restructuring leadership. A woman named Kendra, Wives No Other Wives, texted me a screenshot from a group chat. Lauren was at the dealership this morning. They took her car. Someone else added a photo. Lauren standing under a billboard with her hands jammed in her sweater sleeves while a tow truck lifted a silver sedan like a dead fish. At 1:15, Michael tried me directly. You set the internet on me. Please tell your friends to stop. You set the internet on yourself, I replied. 32 seconds. Your words, your hand on hers. His typing bubble blinked, disappeared, blinked again. We can still salvage this, Ev. Issue a joint statement. Say we'd been separated privately. No. At 2:40, he called Daniel. I know because Daniel called me after. His voice was scraped raw. He asked me to post something, he said. He wanted me to say you two were already over. He wanted me to be his alibi. What did you say? I asked. I said my wedding had one liar too many. I pressed my palm to the counter until the ache climbed up my arm and pushed away the tears. By late afternoon, the secondary collapses started, the ones that tell you a man has built a life out of borrowed image. The bonding company emailed his office about concerns regarding moral turpitude and continued coverage. The landlord of his shared workspace insisted on a deposit increase or vacate. His assistant told a friend of a friend that she was taking a few days to think about things. On the neighborhood app, a post asked, "Is Michael Hart still taking new clients?" The top reply read, "Would you hand your accounts to a man who steals attention at his son's wedding?" He tried to fight back anyway. At 5:03 p.m., he posted a black and white photo of a coffee mug and wrote, "Humbled, learning, choosing love. Please respect our privacy in this painful transition." The comments shredded him, respectfully, at first, then less so as the hashtag kept climbing. Does he not understand that privacy ended when he rented a microphone? Sophie muttered, dropping her phone like it was contaminated. Clara came by around 6 with a draft affidavit in a trembling hand, the notary seal on her desk covered with a towel like a mirror at a funeral. She looked 10 years older than yesterday. I wrote it, she said, voice small. Philip wanted me to include the texts. I did. Good, I said. Tell the truth, all of it. She nodded, tears pooling. He called me 8 times today. He says I'm ruining him. Then you're doing something right, Sophie said flatly. Clara glanced at my daughter. I'm sorry, she whispered, and for once it landed without defense. After she left, the house went quiet except for the dryer thumping and the occasional distant wail of a siren, our town's soundtrack when something embarrassing trends. At 7:22, my phone buzzed again, a number I didn't know. A reporter from the Augusta Herald, polite and predatory at once. MS. Hart, running a piece tomorrow on the economic fallout from public divorces in small markets. She said, we'd love your perspective. No comment, I said. Off the record, she tried. No, I said and ended the call. I knew how off the record turns on you when the quotes fit better in someone else's story. At 8:04, Lauren texted. He said you'd destroy me to get to him. He said you'd call the DA. He says he'll deny everything. Ev, I have the emails. I kept them because he forgets things and I didn't want to be the one left with nothing. Bring them, I wrote before I could decide whether mercy or fury was driving my thumbs. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., she sent a typing bubble, then nothing. 3 dots, a void. I poured tea. I thought about how men rebuild by announcing their work in public while women rebuild by doing the work in private. I thought about how image isn't wealth, and how quickly creditors learn the difference. At 9:31, my phone lit again. Daniel this time, not scraped raw now but precise, the way his voice gets when he's past rage and into purpose. Mom, can you call me? It's about Dad, he said in the voicemail, and it's not just about last night. I called him back immediately. What happened? I asked. He exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I got a letter from Equisure, he said. A credit alert. Someone ran a hard inquiry on my name last month for a business line of credit. I thought it was a mistake. Now I'm thinking it wasn't. My hand went cold around the phone. Did you give your father your social security number recently? Not since I was 19 and he needed it for car insurance, Daniel said. Mom, do you think he used my name? I stared at the dark window over the sink where my face hovered like a stranger's. In the glass, a ghost of the chandelier from the wedding shimmered as if the past could reflect on demand. I think, I said, steady because someone had to be, we're about to find out. And somewhere across town, Michael posted another photo of a coffee mug. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast because Sophie, too restless to sleep, had tried to make breakfast she didn't even eat. She sat at the counter scrolling her phone, her hair pulled back in a rough knot, eyes red but sharp. Daniel's coming over, she announced without looking up. He said he doesn't trust himself to talk to Dad without you there. Good, I said, pouring coffee. We'll talk as a family, our family. At 9:15, Daniel walked in, suit jacket still on from the office he hadn't really gone to. He hugged Sophie first, then me, his arms stiff like a man trying not to crumble. I can't believe him, Daniel said, using my name, my credit on my wedding week. He dropped a folded letter on the counter. Equisure's logo glared up at me. Sophie picked it up, scanning. A hard inquiry, a business line of credit for Hart Consulting LLC. She looked at Daniel, horrified. That's identity theft from your own father. Daniel rubbed his face. I thought maybe it was an error, but after Saturday, his eyes darted to me. Did you know? I knew he was desperate, I admitted, but I didn't know he'd drag you into it. Sophie slammed her phone down. Of course he did, he drags everyone down with him, Aunt Clara, Lauren, now us. He doesn't care who bleeds as long as he gets what he wants. Careful, Daniel said, voice tight. That's still our father. Was, Sophie corrected. He lost the right to that title when he humiliated Mom at your wedding and stole your name for a loan. Daniel flinched, but he didn't argue. He looked at me, eyes searching. What do we do? I slid a folder across the counter. We document, we file, we tell the truth. Philip already has a draft motion ready if he tries to deny it. But you both need to decide where you stand. He'll come after me with everything he has, and he'll try to use you as pawns. Sophie didn't hesitate. Then we make it clear we're not pawns. Daniel's jaw worked. I keep thinking about the speeches he used to give me, about honor, about never cutting corners. He said reputation was the only currency that mattered. And then he spent it all, Sophie muttered. Daniel looked at me, pain etched in his face. I want to stand with you, Mom, but part of me still hears his voice when I was 10, telling me I could be anything. How do I throw that away? I reached for his hand. You don't throw it away. Acknowledge that the man who said those words isn't the man standing in front of us now. His shoulders sagged. Sophie touched his arm. He chose this, Daniel, we didn't. Before he could respond, the front door opened without a knock. Michael strode in, face drawn, phone in one hand. So this is where the secret meetings happen, he sneered, plotting against me in my own house. This isn't your house anymore, Sophie said coldly. Daniel stepped forward, voice firm. Did you use my name for a loan? Michael's smirk faltered. It was temporary, a bridge for the business. You forged my signature, Daniel pressed, voice shaking with fury. On my honeymoon week, Michael's tone hardened. Don't be dramatic, families help each other, you'll thank me when the firm rebounds. No, Daniel said, louder now. Families ask, they don't steal. You stole my name, my credit, and you ruined my wedding day. You don't get to call that help. Michael's eyes flicked between his son and daughter, realizing for the first time that the ground beneath him was gone. You're letting her poison you, he spat, jabbing a finger at me. Your mother's turning you against me. We turned ourselves, Sophie snapped. When we saw you for who you are. For heartbeat, Michael looked almost afraid. Then he shoved the fear down, straightened his shoulders, and barked, fine, choose her. But remember this, I built this family. Without me, you'd have nothing. Daniel's voice was ice. Without you, we'd still have trust. The words hung in the air, heavier than any gavel. Michael's face twisted, but he said nothing. He turned on his heel, slammed the door so hard a picture frame rattled off the wall. Silence followed. Sophie picked up the fallen photo, me, Michael, the kids at the beach years ago, sunburned and laughing. She studied it, then set it face down on the counter. Daniel exhaled. I guess that's it, we've chosen. I looked at them both, my children, fierce and heartbroken, and realized something Michael never would. Love built on truth doesn't collapse when tested, it hardens, and we had just become unbreakable. Lauren arrived at 8:57 with a canvas tote and the look of someone who had slept with the lamp on. She hovered at the threshold like a penitent, then stepped inside when I didn't move to block her. I brought everything, she said, setting the tote on my island. Envelopes, a cheap thumb drive, A manila folder soft at the corners. Emails, screenshots, the lease application. The other thing. Sophie watched from the far end of the counter, arms folded. The other thing, she repeated flat. Which other thing, the affair with my dad or the fraud with my aunt? Lauren swallowed. Both. I slid the folder toward me. Start with the paper. Words can lie. Paper has a harder time. She nodded, fingers trembling as she sorted piles. He told me the prenup was dead, that you didn't care anymore, that the marriage was a formality. She stopped at Sophie's sound of disgust. I believed what I needed to believe, she whispered. I'm not asking you to forgive me for that. I'm asking you to let me fix what I can. I opened the first printout. Subject lines piled up like alibis. Dinner invoice, hold the transfer till Friday, Clara can stamp at home. Then, a chain with my address in it and a photo of our mudroom coats, the blue filing cabinet in the corner. A drawer cracked open. What's this? I asked. Lauren's eyes fell. He sent me to get your cake stand the night before Sophie's birthday. He said you wouldn't mind. He told me which drawer had your W-2s and Daniel's old insurance card. He said he needed the numbers to check a rate. I took pictures. She didn't look up. I'm so ashamed. Sophie went very still. That's how he got Daniel's social. Lauren nodded, tears threatening. He told me it was a family policy renewal. He said you knew. He always said you knew. My stomach turned. I laid the page down like it might burn through the counter. What else? She pushed over a printed email thread. Subject, Hellock Docs Urgent, an attachment list. A final message from a contact labeled C. Don't text about this. Come by salon. I'll stamp. Sophie exhaled a curse that would have made her grandmother faint. I pressed my palm to the edge of the island until the anger steadied into something usable. The thumb drive sat between us like a tiny detonator. What's on it? I asked. Audio, Lauren said. He called from your kitchen the morning after the wedding. He said to delete everything. He said if anyone asked, I was a consultant on a property search and we were separated already. I was shaking so hard I hit record by accident. Her laugh was small and jagged. It's the only accident I'm grateful for. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Michael's voice filled the room, distorted by speaker buzz but unmistakable, confident, impatient, the cadence I'd once mistaken for competence. And if you talk to anyone, Lauren, anyone, say we were over in January. Say she knew. Say Clara handled the paperwork. Say you never saw the accounts. If you panic, I swear to God. The clip ended in a scrape and a breath, Lauren's. He always did like to rehearse, I said, throat tight. Why are you helping us? Sophie asked, not unkind, not kind. Now, after all of this. Lauren looked at me, then at my daughter. Because I ruined my own life thinking I was building another, she said. Because when the tow truck took my car yesterday, I realized I was one mistake away from losing my job too. Because he promised me a house he didn't own and a future he couldn't fund. Because he told me to lie about you, Evelyn, and I finally heard what he'd been training me to be. She swallowed. I won't be that person. I called Philip. He answered on the first ring. Bring it, he said when I summarized. All of it, do not email, hand to hand only. He paused. And make a clean copy of the audio, we'll authenticate. We'll meet you in 30, I said. At the UPS store. A notary with kind eyes watched Lauren sign an affidavit with two hands, as if holding herself down on paper. She described the cake stand, the drawer, the photos, the stamp at Clara's salon. She described the audio. She did not describe the affair except to write. I believed false representations about the status of their marriage. That does not excuse my conduct. Back at my house, she stood in the doorway as if leaving meant falling. This doesn't fix what I did, she said, it just tells the truth. It does both, I said. Truth is a kind of fix that takes time. She nodded, eyes bright. I'll pack my things, she said, almost to herself. I'll move in with my sister for a while. I texted him that it's over, he hasn't answered. He will, Sophie said. He always answers when he's cornered. Lauren left with her tote lighter. The house exhaled around us. I thought about the ways women clean messes they didn't make and wondered when that training starts. At 4:12 p.m., Lauren called again, breathless. He's here, she whispered. Outside my building. Through the phone, I could hear Michael's voice, muffled, insistent. He says if I come down, we can fix the narrative. He says he'll take me to Savannah tonight if I just give him my phone and the drive. Don't go, I said. I'm calling Philip. 5 minutes later, my text pinged. Stay inside. Lock the door. I've notified building security. If he persists, call 911. We'll file for protective order tomorrow if needed. I stayed on the line with her. Lauren, I said, are you safe? She laughed, a torn sound. I don't know what that means anymore. Knock rattled through my phone's speaker. Open the door, Michael's voice boomed from the hallway. Don't make this worse. I'm not opening anything for you again, she said, louder now. Go away, Michael. Silence, then a new knock, firmer, official. A second voice, calm. MS Pierce, Investigator Hall, District Attorney's Office. We'd like a word if you're willing. Lauren's breath hitched. Evelyn, I'm here, I said. You're going to open for them, not for him. She unlatched the chain. The hall noise sharpened in my ear, the scrape of shoes, a clipped introduction, papers exchanging hands. We'd like to talk about a HELOC application and a line of credit in the name of Daniel Hart, the investigator said. Lauren's voice steadied. I have emails, she said, and a recording. Behind the investigator's measured tone, I heard another sound, the fury of a man who can feel the floor give way and still believes sheer will can make it solid again. Michael's voice closer. Lauren, don't say another word. The line crackled. Ma'am, the investigator said to someone I couldn't see, you need to step back. Through the faint echo of the phone, a door clicked shut. Evelyn, Lauren's whisper returned, thin and fierce. They're here, he's here. And so is the truth, I said. In the dial tone quiet that followed, I stared at my own front door, as if a knock might arrive there next. Outside, the cicadas started up, loud enough to be a warning. The courthouse in Augusta smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish, as if justice required both decay and disinfectant. I sat at the petitioner's table with Philip, my attorney, a quiet man whose eyes sharpened only when something mattered. Across the aisle, Michael looked like a man who had dressed in the dark, tie crooked, cufflinks mismatched, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Beside him, a young associate from a corporate firm rifled through papers he didn't understand. The clerk called the case. Hart v. Hart. Judge Owens entered, her black robe sweeping like a curtain call. She had a reputation for cutting through theatrics, which immediately made this Michael's worst stage. Philip rose first. Your Honor, this is a preliminary hearing on respondent's motion to dissolve the freeze on marital assets. We are prepared to show not only that the freeze is appropriate, but that respondent engaged in willful concealment of funds and fraudulent borrowing using his son's identity. Michael shifted, eyes flicking toward Daniel, who sat quietly in the gallery next to Sophie. My children hadn't wanted to come, but they insisted on being there. Daniel's expression was stone. Sophie's was fire. The judge gestured, proceed. Philip slid a binder forward, every tab color-coded. Exhibit A, bank records showing transfers just under $5,000 to undisclosed accounts. Exhibit B, notarized affidavit from Clara Benton confirming she improperly stamped a HELOC application at respondent's request. Exhibit C, emails and messages between respondent and MS, Lauren Pierce, indicating collusion in concealing these transfers. Exhibit D, sworn affidavit and audio recording provided by MS Pierce, confirming respondent's instructions to falsify the timeline of his separation. The judge raised an eyebrow. Audio. Philip pressed play on a small device. Michael's voice filled the courtroom. Say we were over in January. Say she knew. Say Clara handled the paperwork. Say you never saw the accounts. If you panic, I swear to God. When the clip ended, silence throbbed. The judge's gaze landed on Michael. Is that your voice? Michael's lawyer stammered. Your Honor, context matters. This was. Yes or no, Judge Owens said. Michael swallowed. Yes. Then context is unnecessary, she replied dryly. Sophie let out a tiny breath of triumph. Daniel didn't move, but his hand clenched into a fist against his knee. Philip continued. Exhibit E, credit inquiry documents from EquiSure showing respondent used his adult son's identity to apply for a business line of credit. Daniel Hart has provided an affidavit confirming he did not authorize this application. Michael's attorney sputtered. Your Honor, these are family matters. The public nature of these proceedings is prejudicial. Judge Owens leaned forward. The public nature was created when your client announced his separation during his son's wedding toast. Do not lecture this court on prejudice. A ripple of restrained laughter passed through the gallery. Michael's face flushed crimson. Motion to dissolve the freeze is denied, the judge declared. In fact, based on the evidence presented, I am extending the freeze to include respondent's corporate accounts pending full discovery. Additionally, I am granting petitioner exclusive use of the marital home until the final hearing. Michael's head snapped toward me, fury sparking. You can't do this, he hissed under his breath. Met his eyes calm. I already did. Judge Owens' gavel struck. We reconvene in 30 days. Between now and then, counsel will exchange full disclosures. I will not tolerate further concealment. If there is additional fraud, I expect the district attorney to be informed. The courtroom stirred as the session ended. Reporters loitered by the door, sniffing for quotes. I gathered my papers, spine straight. Michael leaned toward me across the aisle, voice low, desperate. Ev, please, don't do this. We can settle. Half the house, half the accounts. Walk away with dignity. I closed my binder. Dignity is walking away without you. Sophie stepped closer, eyes flashing. Dad, for once in your life, stop pretending you care about dignity. Michael's gaze darted to Daniel, silently pleading. Daniel's voice was quiet, but it cut sharper than Sophie's fury. You used my name like it was spare change. We're done, Dad. Don't call me again. The words landed harder than any gavel. Michael recoiled as if his son had struck him. Philip touched my elbow. We should go. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Mrs. Hart, any comment? Did your husband really falsify financial documents? What's next for you? I stopped at the courthouse steps, the sun bright enough to make me squint. What's next, I said clearly, is truth, and truth takes time. Sophie and Daniel flanked me like sentinels. Behind us, Michael stumbled out into the light, alone, his lawyer already peeling away to take another call. Cameras flashed, questions flew. His carefully built image, devoted husband, respected businessman, crumbled in real time. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren, he's unraveling. He came to my office again today, shouting. Security escorted him out. I think he knows it's over. I typed back. It was over the moment he chose spectacle over family. As I slid into the backseat, Sophie touched my hand. You looked powerful in there, Mom. I smiled faintly. I wasn't powerful, I was prepared. And for the first time in years, I felt the difference. The day I signed the lease on a tiny second-floor office above a bakery, the whole place smelled like butter and new beginnings. The landlord slid the keys across the counter as if handing me permission. The room was nothing. 12 by 16, sunlight on scuffed wood, a radiator that hissed like an old aunt who'd seen too much. It felt like everything. I bought a second-hand desk off Marketplace, carried it up the stairs with Daniel grunting behind me, and set my grandmother's brass lamp on top. The shade was dented from 3 moves in a year in the attic. I straightened it with both hands as if you could correct time with care. What are you calling it? Daniel asked, crouched with an Allen wrench and a brow furrowed like his father's when something required patience. Caldwell Financial Transitions, I said. Saying it aloud steadied me. No jargon, no pretense. Women walk in with a stack of fear and leave with a plan. Sophie stuck a temporary decal on the door, her handwriting clean and uncompromising. We'll get you a proper sign when the judge gives Mom the house and we sell Michael's golf clubs, she said, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel laughed without apology. My first client arrived on a Tuesday in a blue dress that had lost a battle with a dryer. I'm Marisol, she said, apologizing to the room for being in it. Widowed at 59, a mountain of paperwork in a canvas bag and a mortgage her late husband had handled. We spread the statements across the desk like cards, and I translated column by column until her breath slowed. You talk like you don't think I'm stupid, she said, soft, surprised. You're not, I said. You were busy holding everything else. On Thursday came Tanya, 38, leaving a man who had convinced her the 401k required his signature, and that debt was a personality trait. She swore in bursts, then cried in hiccups, then took notes in neat lines. Say it back to me, I told her at the end, the way I'd trained auditors twice her age. What accounts? What deadlines? What's yours? My name's on more than the marriage license, she said. My name's on my future. She smiled at her own audacity. Word moved faster than advertising ever could. A librarian I'd never met asked if I'd teach a Saturday class. Budgets after betrayal, because nothing sells out like honesty. I put together slides in a coffee shop while the group chat I'd muted tried to decide whether Michael's latest apology post counted as growth. I ignored the internet and built a worksheet. Assets, liabilities, obligations, lies. Diana came by with a spider plant and a hug that lasted 1 beat too long for dignity. I knew you were good, she said, glancing at Marisol's intake form on my desk. But watching you be good is different. I'm not good, I said. Arranging pens in a mug like that could pass for calm. I'm practiced. She set the plant on the windowsill. Both can be true. In the quieter hours, when clients weren't telling me the worst truths they'd said out loud, I drafted my notice to Truvanta, 30 years. I printed it on heavy paper because endings deserve weight. The HR director teared up and slipped me a note that said, if I ever leave Tom, you'll be my first call. We both pretended it was a joke. At night, the office was a room of my own and a chapel. I stayed late sorting receipts into boxes labeled with women's names. There's a reverence in order after chaos, the way a ledger balances when you've finally located the missing penny. I would run my hand over the stacks, feel the hum of a life reassembled. Mom, Sophie said one evening, leaning in my doorway with Thai takeout, you know you don't have to save everyone. Don't spoil my hobby, I said, and we ate on the floor, laughing about nothing because laughter is a currency too. By the end of the month, a reporter asked to profile the woman helping Augusta's women hold their ground. I said no. My clients deserved privacy, and so did my piece. Instead, I wrote 3 sentences for a website Amelia built between meetings. We translate. We plan. We stand with you until you can stand without us. On a bright Friday, I walked to the Secretary of State's office to file my LLC. I'd rehearsed this moment, signing my name in a way that tied it to something that wasn't a man. The clerk typed, nodded, then frowned. "Huh," she said, flicking to a new screen. "You're already in the system." "No," I said, cheerful in the automatic way you are before a blow lands. "This is new." She turned the screen so I could see. Caldwell Financial Transitions, LLC, filed 2 weeks earlier. Registered agent, Evelyn Hart. Mailing address, a rented UPS box across town. A manager's name I recognized despite the deliberate misspelling, Lauren Pierce. The room tilted. "Someone filed that without me," I said, steady because I had learned to talk through shock. "That's my name." The clerk shrugged the bureaucrat's shrug that says systems don't care who bleeds. "You can challenge," she offered. "Fraud complaint takes time. Time, the one commodity Michael spent like cash." I stepped outside into noon heat, called Philip. He picked up on the first ring. "Tell me it's a glitch," I said. "It's a tactic," he replied, paper moving on his end. "He's squatting your name to muddy your launch and set up a story where you're the thief. Classic control move. We'll file to void the registration, get an injunction, notify the DA that the identity misuse pattern continues." "Lauren," I said. "Spelled wrong, he dragged her into it again. She may not even know, or he used her with consent. Either way, we pull the thread." "What do I call the company in the meantime?" I asked, absurdly practical, because it was the only way not to scream. Philip didn't miss a beat. "Call it what it is, Caldwell Transitions. Your clients don't hire a full sentence." I laughed once sharp. "You're getting good at this." "You made me," he said, and I could hear his smile soften into steel. "One more thing, the DA's investigator asked if you'd come in Monday. They've expanded the probe. Line of credit in Daniel's name wasn't the first. There's an older file, same pattern. Different victim." "Who?" I asked, throat dry. Philip paused. "Your sister," he said. "Looks like he borrowed against Clara's salon in 2021 using a forged guarantee. We only saw it because Lauren's emails reference paying back rent then. It's bigger than we thought." I stood there with my new keys biting my palm, the sign on my door not yet real, the plant on my sill still rooting. "Monday," I said. "I'll be there." Across the street, a busker started playing something bright and familiar, a song from the year Michael and I bought our first couch on credit and called it an investment. I watched a woman my age stop, smile, drop $1, and keep walking. I turned back to my little office, unlocked the door, and stepped into a future I would have to keep naming until the paperwork caught up. The final hearing fell on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day when the courthouse felt less like a building and more like a machine. Grind in, grind out, lives stamped and filed. I wore navy instead of black because grief was finished, and grief had no place in a room where victory could be measured in percentages. Michael arrived late, tie askew, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a man reduced to the echo of himself. Lauren wasn't with him. Neither was Clara. His lawyer, now a weary solo practitioner, shuffled papers without enthusiasm. Judge Owens wasted no time. She reviewed the evidence briskly, the fraudulent transfers, false notarization, the identity theft attempts. The prenup, clear and ironclad, gleamed on the record like a blade. Based on the fidelity clause as well as respondent's financial misconduct, she said, the petitioner retains full ownership of the marital home, the vacation property, and 70% of the joint investments. Respondent is left with personal accounts not already encumbered, as well as his business interests, which the court notes are currently in distress. The gavel's strike was soft but final. The marriage of Evelyn and Michael Hart was legally dissolved. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he turned to me, his face drawn, his voice hollow. "Ev, I made a terrible mistake. Is there any chance at all we could start over?" I studied him. The man who once held my hand through miscarriages. The man who bought me gas station flowers after we fought about bills. The man who chose spectacle and betrayal over truth. "No," I said gently, firmly. "That door is closed." For once, he didn't argue. He nodded, a broken motion, and walked out of the courtroom alone. 6 months later, the sign over my office read Caldwell Transitions. The state had voided the fraudulent filing, and the DA's office was still circling Michael on Clara's old loan. My practice had outgrown the second-floor space. I had 2 associates now, a waiting list, and women who hugged me at the end of appointments as if I'd rescued them from drowning. Daniel and Lily visited often, settling into their new marriage with laughter that filled my quiet house. Sophie spent weekends helping me run seminars, her fiery voice coaxing strangers into bravery. Clara, chastened, was rebuilding too slowly, honestly. Lauren had moved out of state, her emails short but steady. "I'm in therapy. I'm working. I'll never forget." One evening, after a long day of clients, I closed the blinds and sat with a glass of wine, looking at the stacks of files on my desk. Each name represented a woman who had walked in shattered and left with a spine made of numbers and clarity. Each story reminded me that survival wasn't small, it was monumental. Sophie called just then. "Mom, you should see Dad's latest apology video," she said with a wry edge. "He's standing in an empty office talking about resilience. The comments are brutal." I smiled faintly. "Let him talk. Words don't rebuild walls." She laughed softer. "You rebuilt yours." When I hung up, I thought about that night at Daniel's wedding, the chandelier throwing light across a room full of betrayal. Michael wanted an audience for my collapse. Instead, he gave me a stage for my rebirth. The final goodbye hadn't been spoken in court. It had been spoken in every choice since. And as I locked my office door and stepped into the evening air, I felt lighter than I had in 30 years. Not triumphant, not bitter, simply free. Because in losing him, I had found myself.